Hey everyone, welcome to our very first podcast here at Quartermaster. We're really excited to get this started. I'm Ryan, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here, and I'm with our founding partner, Don.
Hey everyone, how are you doing today? Great having you on our first podcast, and we're excited about getting you some great information about things that concern you as a business owner, how to keep more of what you make. That's really what our goal is here. And so, Ryan, let's start off with one of our most popular subjects that we hear all the time. That's research and development.
Absolutely. So this has been a big topic recently. So research and development credits are very beneficial to a lot of businesses that's out there. We as a company, we specialize in R&D credits, and we're going to go into that a little bit today, kind of talk about what it is, how you can apply for it, and then what the big benefit is for you down the road. So let's go ahead and jump into that a little bit.
So I think the biggest thing that we hear, Ryan, when we go around the country is that they think, I don't qualify. That's our biggest thing. I don't qualify, particularly when we get into the medical, which we spend a lot of time in, even though we do manufacturing and software and technology and things like that. It's the medical space. So, you come from a medical family. Your dad's a chiropractor. So, him being one of our clients, you can kind of walk us through some of the questions he may have.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, when they think of R&D, in case anybody is not aware of it, R&D, it's been around since 1981. It's been around for a while, actually. And what happens is a lot of people tend to think of it, there's a side for it that basically applies to manufacturing companies, and then there's also a side to it where it applies to medical industry as well. My dad, being a chiropractor, is in that medical industry, and some of the questions and things that he had when we first told him about it was some pretty common questions. One of the questions is this thing sounds too good to be true. That's a big thing that most people say. So basically for him going in and looking at this credit, some of the things that he does in his practice every single day help him generate this credit. Some of the things from his modalities, his techniques, things like that, who he hires into his practice has a big to do as far as what type of credits he gets back from this. And so when we first started working with him, we realized that how beneficial this credit could be for chiropractors and other in the medical industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So your dad being one of our initial clients 9 years ago in 2015, and we've been finding him credits every year. But the big thing I always tell these doctors that we talk to is that what we're doing is we're looking to see what you're doing Monday through Friday that would qualify.
Yes.
Now, there are some professions, some chiropractors, some medical that don't qualify. But what we're looking at is for some specific things, and there's a 4-part test that the IRS has, Ryan, and you want to kind of start through that, and we'll kind of walk through to kind of, and this applies to any business out there. So if you meet these 4 tests, all 4, then the good news is you may very well qualify.
So for the medical industry and all industries that apply for R&D credits, there's a 4-part test as far as how you qualify for this credit. So Don, would you like to go into that 4-part test a little bit?
Sure. So let me list them off first, and then we'll drill down into those and kind of talk how they may apply to your particular business. Number 1, it's got to be technological in nature. Secondly, it has to be a level of uncertainty at the outset, meaning that not knowing exactly how you're going to get from point A to point B, because every situation is different. Thirdly, there needs to be a trial and error process. And fourthly, it has to be based upon the hard sciences. So let me kind of drill down those a little bit first. So technological in nature. So again, we'll talk first of all about manufacturing. So technological standpoint is that they are using technology like CAD design, things such as that to create a design of how they want to. I'll give you a prime example. So we have a client in California, and it was referred to us by another client who said, hey, you might look into this here. And they make custom fencing, fabrication of gates and stuff. And I had the privilege of going out there and seeing what they do. They take iron, and they twist it, they bend it, they weld it, all kinds of stuff. But before they get to that point, they pull out their computer and they do a CAD design of what it's going to look like so they can show the customer. So that's the first part. That's going to be technological in nature. So in the chiropractic space, of course, they are utilizing technology, whether that's x-rays, some kind of CLA or something to that degree, some type of testing. So there's that creation. Once that happens, Ryan, then of course it goes into the level of uncertainty. So give an example real quickly of how that might look like for, let's say, a doctor, a chiropractor, someone like that.
Absolutely. So whenever a doctor has a new patient that comes into there, they have to do an initial evaluation to see what exactly is going on inside that person, what needs to be corrected or fixed or whatever the case may be. and they have to create a custom care plan in order to really help that patient out. They're not really even sure if that is going to be the best for the patient until enough time has gone by for them to be able to evaluate whether or not it's going to work for that patient.
So I want to make sure I'm clear on here.
Sure.
So you're saying that, let's say, for example, if I go down here to my general practitioner and I say, I have a sinus infection, as an example, and he's going to have a standard protocol and say, take the CPAP or whatever it may be, or antibiotics or something to that degree. That wouldn't be a level of uncertainty. He pretty knows how to fix that,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so this has to be more of a custom protocol, meaning that they're going to have to take a little bit more time and effort in determining how to handle the patient situation.
Sure.
So what this looks like is after that initial evaluation of the patient, and enough times, let's say 6 weeks, maybe their evaluation times is monthly, it could be every bi-monthly, whatever the case may be, however long it is. They're going to come back and they're going to look at their notes and they're going to see if what they're doing has been working or not, if there need to be tweaks or changes. And they do that by using the technology that you were speaking about before, whether that's x-rays, whether that's, like I said, blood work, whether that's any sort of 3D imaging, whatever the case may be, to see if what they're doing is working. And then from there, they might have to tweak what they're doing in order to continue to help the patient or improve upon what they're doing to help with the patient.
And that kind of leads into the third part, third test, and that is a trial and error.
Yes.
So I like to use this example since we have a lot of space in the chiropractic world, and I had this conversation here recently. So I use the example, let's say, for example, I have a subluxation issue with my back, and the chiropractor determines that I should use decompression. So they put me on decompression, and they look and see, going back to test later on to see if there's any improvement or enough improvement. And then they determine that we could improve it by adding in maybe like laser or electric stem or something like that there that would help enhance the improvement process. Absolutely. So that would be a good example of the trial and error.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, it's just about tweaking that to help improve the patient's outcome or even the potential of a patient outcome. The whole degree with trial and error in itself is what you don't know if it's actually going to be beneficial or not.
Right.
And with every patient being a unique case, a unique situation, it's not going to be cut and dry for every single patient.
Yeah, so let me kind of go to a category that we get a lot of. So dentists, I think you just came back from a dental conference up in Chicago, a very big one, dental lab. And so the question comes at, do dentists qualify? And my question to you, Ryan, do dentists qualify?
In large, no, basically. And the reason for that is because what they do is pretty standard. It's pretty, not to demean anybody or the profession, it's just pretty standard, pretty cut and dry protocol for the most part as far as that goes. Outside of specialty work, they typically do not qualify. Now, the cool thing is if they have a dental lab inside of their dental office, then that changes the game. Absolutely. Because dental labs are one of the largest qualifying industries for R&D credit for the sole reason that everything that they do is custom for an individual client. And so all the supply costs that they go into, the labor cost, it helps to bring up that R&D credit. So whether you're a dental lab or even a dentist office with a dental lab in the office, that's going to be a big benefit to you.
I want to come back here a little bit later about how we get to the dollar figure here in a second. But the last one is going to be based upon hard sciences. So I get a lot of questions can a acupuncturist or a massage therapist or a counselor or anything like that qualify? The challenge is we have to go based upon the IRS determining if it's based upon hard sciences. And that, unfortunately, disqualifies a lot out there in the medical profession and non-medical profession. Another good example is HVAC. You're building a house, and every house is, I'll say this. There's a lot of houses that are different, that are custom, and maybe your HVAC system has to be designed specifically to accommodate. Unfortunately, doesn't meet that fourth test, which is hard sciences. So, again, that's the big thing. Keep in mind there's a 4-part test when it comes to research and development. Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned about dental labs. So, generally, for example, working in the medical space, it's pretty much limited to wages. Yes. So when we look at a chiropractor as an example, we're saying it's going to be the 2 main factors. Number 1 is time spent in qualified activities, which the qualified activities, again, could be modalities, it could be re-exams, it could be, studying different techniques. But the other part of that is the wages. So the wages are a big, big factor. I mean, that's really where everything is based off of. And so when we look at that, Ryan, what is generally the minimum that we have to see as far as wages for there to make sense to go through this process? And that's my first question. The second question is, how far can we go back? So let's say you've never taken R&D before, or you didn't think you qualified. Maybe your CPA said you didn't qualify, or whatever the story is, and I'll address that a little bit later. What's generally the requirement to go through that process?
Absolutely. So, Don, we've been doing this for R&D for about the last 7-8 years now, which is a fun story in itself, and we'll get into that a little bit about how we kind of got into the R&D. But after completing well over 3,000 studies, primarily chiropractic studies, we've determined that the sweet spot, I guess you could say, or entry point for able to get the credit is around $200,000 in annual payroll. And that's for the chiropractic medical industry as a whole. That's going to be an awesome
Can I get a clarifying question on that there? So when you're saying 200,000 of qualified payroll, can you kind of dig down a little bit deeper so there's any confusion?
Absolutely. So the payroll that we're looking for is going to come from doctors and staff that's working directly hands-on with the patient. Typically, we can't use wages of office staff members. If you're not putting hands on a patient and actually carrying out these modalities, these techniques, these therapies, we're not going to be able to use those wages primarily. So qualified wages are going to be the staff and associates that are in the office that are working directly hands-on with the patients, carrying out the evaluations, reevaluations, therapies, and modalities.
So, and we're using chiropractic quite a bit because we have a lot of chiropractic clients. Now, there's other ones we'll talk about as well. So, so let's use the $200,000 as an example. So the best way to determine, and we look at this on an individual year-by-year basis. And so from the federal standpoint, let's assume out of that 200,000, Ryan, that 30%, and it could be higher, we've seen as high as 80%, but let's say 30%, very conservatively, of that 200,000 is qualified time, meaning that all the 30% of their time is used in qualified research examples or expenses. Time. Activity, sorry, got tongue-tied on there, on activities. So that's $60,000.
Sure.
So we have a $60,000. Now that becomes an expense. So on a federal level, you're going to get about 7 to 8 cents. So let's just use 8 cents for the example. That's $4,800 per year. And we can go back how many years generally?
So the cool thing about R&D credits is that you can actually go back 3 years. And depending on what state you're going to be in, and this is another cool topic, is like California, you can go 4 years back from the state level. Federally, you can only go back 3 years. And then every other state typically, with the exception of California, is 3 years as well. But California, if you're in that state, they tax you to death in that state, but they also allow you to go a little extra back as far as an extra year for your R&D credits, for your state credit.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up California, of course. It is true. They do tax the fire out of those folks out there. But the neat thing about California, and we have probably about 7 or 8 states that are very similar to this here, but we call it the double dip state, meaning that, let's say, for example, I did a 3-year study and I got $5,000 a year for each one of those years, and I got $15,000. Now I'm going to go to the state of California. They're going to pretty much match what I got from the federal. So that's $15,000. All right, so now I'm at 30 plus another year, so another 5,000. So in that situation, I get 35,000, which our average is about 30,000. So we call them the double dip states, and double dipping is not good when it comes to putting chips into stuff, but it's great when it comes to research and development. We got things like states like Utah and Arizona and South Carolina, a bunch of states out there that maybe it's not 100%, but maybe it's 30% or 50%, whatever the federal government gives. So we definitely want to encourage you, even though like the great state of Texas where I'm from, they don't give a state credit. They don't have a state income tax either. But it's still a great benefit to pursue out there. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so along with that, so like we were saying earlier, basically you have 3 years that you can go back and get this credit. The other cool thing about the credit, Don, is that you can take this credit every single year. It's not a one and done like the ERC. You take it once and it's done. You know, it's one of those credits that literally, as long as you continue to own that business and run that business and you own a part of that business, you can take this credit. And so this is a long-term credit, which is really impactful for a lot of businesses to help, you know, continues to improve upon processes, protocols, and bring new things into their business, even do hiring, things like that. It's pretty beneficial credit on that step.
So let me kind of talk through a little bit about going back the last 3 years. So how does a client claim that if they're, they've already filed their taxes 3 years ago, and I want you to talk about SOLs as well.
Yeah.
So how do they claim this?
Absolutely. So how the process works is you will have to, once we identify the credits, and we run that study for you, basically see what type of credits you qualify for. In order to go get the credit, you do have to amend your tax returns. You have to amend your past year tax returns. And once that's done, we do have to file that with the IRS. And then it typically takes, just so you're aware, anywhere from 6 to 12 months, primarily more on the 12-month basis. The IRS has been backed up recently. But what we do is it's basically once it's filed, it takes around that time to get, and then again, you can do that every single year as far as that goes with the amended returns.
Okay, and so I want to talk about SOLs, statute of limitations. Kind of you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So SOLs, it does not mean what you think it means.
Well, it can mean if you miss it.
Exactly, it can mean that. But SOL is the statute of limitations, and essentially what that does is the IRS gives us a date that is the last date of filing before you miss out on that year. Unfortunately, for a lot of businesses, Don, they miss out every year that they don't take R&D because every year you don't take it, 1 year falls off. Yep. So it means, in short, if you file your taxes on time in April, every year, 1 year falls off from 3 years of the date of that filing. So coming up on this April of this year, you're going to miss out on your 2020 R&D credits if you filed on time. Yes. If you filed an extension, you do have until the October deadline or whenever you filed in between that date.
That's important to remember.
Yes.
Even though you filed an extension, maybe you filed in July.
Yeah.
It's going to be that July date.
Absolutely. So if you did an extension like he was saying, and you filed in July, your deadline is July. Otherwise, you're missing out on 2020. And so there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars lost that we see every single year because, unfortunately, a lot of people don't put this in priority, which is another big thing. And then you can't get that money back any other way. And so that's very unfortunate as far as that goes. So, the big thing is just making sure that you know when your statute of limitations are so that you can get this stuff done, taken care of on time.
Yeah.
So,
one of the big challenges we have here, and I can't speak for any other companies out there, but is once we've had a conversation with the person who's inquired about research and development, whether that's somebody we met somewhere around the country or whether they were referred to us or however they find out about us, a conversation happens, a discovery call, and then we gather some basic information, and then our onboarding team goes out there and gets documentation. And Ryan, since you have been over that department for many, many years and just recently was transitioned to another position here as our CTO, that is, what's the biggest challenge when it comes to that part of it?
Absolutely. So the biggest challenge is we do have to collect the last 7 years of W-2s and 1099s. That tends to be the biggest challenge for our clients because we know how busy they are. I mean, just going to these conferences are busy, but yet it's actually a break for some of these doctors, But
Exactly.
I mean, it's crazy. And sometimes the document collection can be a little bit of a cumbersome process for them to be able to go get those and get those into us. But I can't stress enough how once they're in, and how valuable it is to spend that time to be able to do it. And so that's one of the biggest hindrances as far as that goes. And we know how busy it can be. And so that's why if you can get on board and get it together as quickly as possible and get it out of the way, that's probably one of the biggest ways to start your processing quickly.
So, and it's important to know that getting those W-2s and getting that information, and why do we need so much? Well, the IRS says that if we want to determine how much you're eligible for those 3 years, we have to do a 6-year study, meaning that we have to, and when I say that, a study of your W-2s and the payroll and things like that to determine how much you're eligible for the most recent 3 years. And so it does require that. Now, some good things on the horizon is that we're actually in the conversation with a technology company that allow us to actually get these W-2s and 1099s electronically.
Yes.
Stay tuned for that. So even if you have your own payroll company or you have a company that does payroll for you, all you have to do is go to them and ask them to provide the last 6 years because the IRS requires us to do that so that way that we can prove how much you're eligible for. And the question comes is, well, I've changed payroll companies. Keep in mind that when you change from one to another, let's say you're at Paychecks and you go to ADP, that information is supposed to transfer over. And so that might help things out if you use QuickBooks, whatever the case is, or you have someone internally, they can actually pull that as well.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Perfect.
So once we get that, Ryan, once we get the W-2s and everything in, what's the process from there?
Absolutely. So once the W-2s are in, basically our onboarding team does a quick scan to make sure that we have everything appropriate that we need to do, and they begin creating some files for us so that we can take this R&D study. Basically, we take it in, and then we start prepping you for the study, the software study. We have an impeccable software, and the cool thing about it that we can talk about is we have leading industry experts that actually take you through the process, which, to my knowledge, nobody else has as far as that goes. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit. That'd be good.
So when we started, 7, 8 years ago, of course, we have tax attorneys, some very, very intelligent tax attorneys on our team. But what we found is that they were looking from the outside into these businesses, whether you're a chiropractor or a dental lab or whatever the case is. And what we realized is by us bringing in subject matter experts, so, for example, we have 2 doctors on our staff. We have a former owner of a dental lab on our team. And so that's the way we are seeing the credits go up. And you see the numbers, Ryan.
So just to kind of back up a little bit, when we first started doing this about 7 years ago or so, maybe a little longer now, like you were saying, we were seeing numbers come in, and it was good numbers.
Yeah.
We thought it was good numbers.
We had nothing to compare it with.
Yeah, exactly, nothing to compare it with. And so, it's just one of those things where once we were able to incorporate this new software and find some industry experts, people that have been in that industry for years, 20, 30 years, that knew the language, we realized that like I said, our tax attorneys speak tax attorney language, and the other industry speaks their language. Like it's just all about what language you speak. And so when we started including these industry experts into our business, it was night and day as far as the type of credits we were seeing, because they can ask the questions based off the IRS guidelines and their industry knowledge that help get the maximum amount of credit that you can possibly get. And so it's been amazing to see the change.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting. We want to continue to add to that too, because we have a few other industries that we have seen where there's opportunity to really impact. Our goal really through this whole process, Ryan, we have a conversation in our leadership meeting all the time, is to raise $500 million or find $500 million of credits for business owners out there, because this is money that's fallen through the cracks. And, we had a conversation earlier about a whole different tax situation, another topic, that the reality is people just don't know. And our goal really is to educate. That's why we're doing this podcast. That's why we travel. We did 80 events last year. We did 80 events the year before and 70-some the year before, is to really educate as many people out there that they are eligible or potentially eligible for this credit. So I want to address something because I hear this all the time. And so my background is I've owned 3 CPA firms, and when I sold my last one 7 years ago, and I had a couple conversations with CPAs today, one in California and one in Virginia, and the question comes up is, does this increase the chance of audit by taking this credit? So I'll bait you on that one there.
Absolutely. I love this question. So whenever discussing this, that's always one of the top questions that come up. And discussing this credit, the cool thing about it is it's actually one of the only credits out there that actually comes with essentially a pre-audited form beforehand. That, to my knowledge, there's no other credit out there that's like that. It's more of a file and hold your breath, type stuff. Or it's a, like I said, or with this R&D credit, when we file this credit for you, we have to supply something called a claim for refund report. And it's an extremely detailed report that is checking off all the marks that the IRS requires in order to qualify for the R&D credit. And it has to be approved on the front end of that. Yeah. So while it was already a low percentage, if there was ever a chance of an audit in the beginning, now it's almost next to none, which is amazing. And the cool thing about it though too is like one of the tax attorneys I was speaking to said it almost drops it. We can't say 100%, but it almost drops it 99.999%. And that's a pretty cool fact because I don't know any other coverage that does that.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's the neat thing about it is they're taking, they have 60 days to review our CFR that you referred to, the claim for refund, and review over to make sure that it meets the four-part test, to make sure that that everything that we are documenting, which is very thorough documentation, as Ryan referred to, is meeting all the requirements, and that our client is truly eligible, meaning that they have a yes or no within 60 days, that once they get the file and they're reviewing it. And we've not had any kickback because they didn't qualify.
Yeah, we've not had a single CFR sent back, which in and of itself is amazing.
It is.
The other cool part is let's just say that you're like somebody's our first one that ever gets kicked back. The cool thing is that because it's almost like a no harm, no foul policy with this being pre-audited up front, we actually get the opportunity to resubmit it if we need to.
Yeah.
With no increase or red flag of an audit, no nothing like that. If something's incorrect on it, we'll reevaluate it, be able to go into it. So it's really just created this safe barrier for people to explore and jump into this R&D credit and start taking it with the breath of fresh air of knowing that it's pre-taken care of and you have this buffer zone.
Yeah, and that happened just a little over 2 years ago, January of 22. And when we first heard it, it was like, like anything else, it's more documentation, more, paperwork. But with all sincerity, looking back now, it's been the best thing that's ever happened to the research and development industry. And unfortunately, a lot of CPAs aren't even aware of this. That's why I keep on hearing the same thing, increased chance of audit, so on and so forth. And the good news is all we have to do is refer them to the code that says everything's pre-approved now.
Yeah.
And
well, I want to ask you something.
Sure.
So that's probably one of my top two questions that I get from people asking about taking the R&D is the audit question. The next one that I get is, why hasn't my CPA told me about this?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And after owning a few CPA firms, the reality is this is a very special or specialty. And you really don't, even if your CPA, which I've had that conversation here recently, tries to do it, the reality is what we just talked about before, if they're not experienced and understand the process, and from the inside out, like I said, we use subject matter experts, then they're going to really hamstring their clients. Now, why don't they know about it? It's not a conversation that comes up. It's not, again, the IRS code is very, very intense, and so becoming an expert or understanding everything about the code is very challenging. So that's why in my conversation with the CPA out in California today, Ryan, she said, how can I refer other clients over to you?
Yeah.
Because they realize everyone needs to be in their lane and do what they do best. And that's why prior to just 7 years ago, that we outsourced, because we realized that we didn't have the internal expertise to do that. Now that's all changed. And, again, whether that's subject matter experts, tax attorneys, accountants, CPAs, so.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, I think that's a valid thing. Everybody stays in their lane, and when you look at CPAs, the majority of their job is to make sure that everybody remains compliant, doing the tax filing work, things like that, and they just don't have the time and resources to be able to provide the credits and the studies and get the maximum amount. And so I would say probably 9 times out of 10 when we have a conversation with a CPA, which we do frequently, they're on board by the end of it. They're like, hey, this is going to help our client get money. This is going to help our client, be more beneficial. You guys are experts. You take it on. That's less for me to have to do. But usually another big question that they have is, am I going to have to do it? Am I going to have to do the amendment? We're like, no, we do it all. We are a turnkey business. We do the study. We do the estimate amount. We do the returns. We do the follow through. You don't have to lift a finger.
Well, and that's a good point, because the reason why, there's some R&D companies out there say, listen, here's the stuff, give it to your CPA. And unfortunately, history has shown that when we first started, we thought that may be a good idea. Well, it turned out to be not such a good idea to give it to their CPA to go back, because if they don't know how to do it, then it becomes a mess as well. So that's why we have a great team of accountants and accounting professionals and tax managers and EAs and CPAs on our team, because we want to make sure it's done right the first time. Because if you send it in, even with the CFR requirement now, and it's not done right on the documentation on the amended return, it's a mess. Now, going forward, once we do that back study, Ryan, every year, like you said earlier, they can apply for this R&D credit every year. We do a brand new study, generally in the first quarter of the year, January, February, March, and then they can take it proactively.
Yes.
And so at that time, do we do the tax return, I guess is my question.
Yeah, so for current years, so meaning that after we've done your past 3-year study and you go to apply for it for the current year, you don't have to amend anything. You don't have to actually wait or file your taxes, then go apply for the credit. You can actually get your study done early before you file your taxes, and then we can supply the documentation to give to your CPA where they essentially plug and play our documentation in with your tax returns, and then you can get your benefit, your true credit benefit, immediately that year, as soon as they file.
So let's chat through that a little bit. So let's say, for example, I've been doing my quarterly estimates, I've been doing my withholding from my W-2, and my CPA says, hey, Don, you owe Uncle Sam $30,000. So generally, I'd have to stroke a check on April 15th, send it off to the IRS, that $30,000. But if I have a $10,000 credit, how does that impact that $30,000?
Absolutely. That $10,000 credit is going to act as a credit. It's going to take out $10,000 of the liability that you owe, now reducing it to $20,000 that you owe. And that's an amazing credit. And as you continue to take it, so here's another scenario. Let's say that you don't have all the liability to be able to take the full amount of the credit, because that happens as well.
Yeah, it does.
So you can actually have a bigger credit than you may have tax liability. So let's say that you have $10,000 in tax liability, but your R&D credit comes out to be $20,000 for the current year. What will happen is you can actually utilize $10,000 of that $20,000 credit, wipe away that tax liability, and then the remaining $10,000 is going to actually carry forward into the next year.
So if I don't use it, I don't lose it?
No, absolutely. You actually have 20 years to use it.
Oh, wow.
So there's a good chance that you have the ability to what we call snowball the credit. So as you continuously come back and do the credit, you can keep getting more and more and more credit on top of each other. And if you have a big liability every year, this is a good chance to wipe most of that away.
So that's good. I'll give a prime example. I have a new client who just joined us, and his income, because he added a new modality inside of his practice, actually neuropathy, his income doubled. So his tax liability now doubled from what he was making before. So he had a carry forward now here for 23 that he's doing his taxes now. He's able to use that carry forward to apply towards that extra tax.
Yeah, it's a great benefit. And really, once you start, there's no reason to stop. As long as you own the business, you're going to want to take this credit. It's not putting you out of your way every year to do this thing. We're talking about to redo the study, we're talking about a 45-minute call to basically get you tens of thousands of dollars back. Why would you not do that? How much of your time, hour-wise, would you want? I mean, you're not seeing in an hour worth of seeing patients, you're probably not making $10,000 in that hour, you know? So it's worth it to keep doing it.
That's a good point. Yeah. But on that same note is we had an anesthesiologist, I think you saw that, that just went through their study and didn't qualify because some things had changed up in his practice and they weren't in anything new coming along here. So that's why you have to have the study done every year, Ryan, because we don't know. And I've seen this happen too with the CPA. They thought, well, we'll just take what you got last year and we'll just use that again. Well, number one, you can't do that.
It's not copy and paste.
It's not copy and paste. Because number one, you can't use the same CFR because, number one, there's been no improvement. So, just again, we've seen all kinds of little shenanigans go out there. And actually, this one here that tried to pull this was actually a dental lab. And he used the one from before, which he got $100,000 for the year before.
Sure.
And when we did the study last year, he was going to get $250,000. So his CPA kind of shot himself in the foot, or shot his client in the foot. Fortunately, we're going to be able to go back and fix this. We'll go back and amend it. But that's the type of stuff, making sure that that those type of things don't happen is very, very important. So let's kind of push this a little bit and see, okay, so let's say I've done the amendments and such. What does it look like after that? What, as far as, am I just kind of hurry up and wait type of situation? Does the IRS call me? Do they send me mail? What happens?
Great question. So, the IRS is very quick to take our money, very slow to give it back.
Yes.
So just to give you a little synopsis of what we go through. So once we complete your study, and you've chose to move forward with this, and we actually start amending your returns, things like that. Once it's submitted from the IRS, like I was saying in the beginning, you're looking at on the quickest end, probably 6 months, but more on average 12 months to be able to process these claims with the IRS. Ever since COVID, things have been a little slow. So we just, you will want to set proper expectations when it comes to this process. The amazing part about what we do, and I don't know any other firm that really does this, but we do something we call our advocacy program. In our advocacy program, we have special software that allows us to check on your returns from the day that we file it, whether it's e-filed or whether it's sent to the IRS through mail. We can check on it. The IRS, unfortunately, doesn't let us call until the 20-week mark, so that's unfortunate, but the software lets us check immediately. So that's what we do. So from the moment that we file these returns, we begin checking up, usually between 30 and 60 days after processing. There's really no need in the first 30 days because it's just getting processed. And again, you're looking at a 6 to 12 month period. But after that, we start checking and giving you updates along the way to make sure that you don't have to wear another hat, because you're probably wearing 6 or 7 as a business owner. Why do you have to check the IRS? That's what you pay us to do, essentially.
Yeah. And, the point is with that software, which, I believe was probably one of our greatest investments as far as the benefit of our clients, is it gives us alerts. So every day that we go in there, or every week that we go in there, it pops up alerts. So we know what's happening inside your file. So if there's an amendment filed, it notifies us. When there's a refund issued, it has a big red exclamation point on there. Yeah. So we know there's money going out. And I had the opportunity actually yesterday for Dr. Kim that I was able to send her an email and say, hey, your 2019 is being issued. And plus, we forgot one last thing. Yeah. When we go back and do amended returns, and we go back like to 2021, 22, what else does the IRS do?
So they will pay you interest on the longer it takes for you to get your refunds. They actually pay you interest in that time you should have been receiving those refunds. So it could be a couple $100s or more, depending on how long it takes. And this just kind of sweetens the deal for the most part. We love to look at it like an investment, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm going to come to that here in a second. But like in her case, talking about interest, she was supposed to get $17,000 for that 1 year. Wow. She's getting over $19,000. Just that accumulated interest since 2019. Yep. Now, again, we are talking about the IRS. It's not going to be something you're going to, when you're talking about investing into the market, it's not going to compare anywhere close to that. Now, so going back to what you were saying, Ryan, so one thing we have a conversation with clients all the time is when it comes to engaging our firm, and this is true whether you engage us or someone else for R&D, there's got to be some compensation. We unfortunately, as much as we would love to do it for free, that's just not going to happen because we have to pay all these attorneys and accountants and stuff. But the amount that is when you engage us, we do charge a fee. Sure. We call it the investment. Yep. And like any other investment, there's a not necessarily a guaranteed return as you would get in other investments, whether that's the crypto or the stock market or real estate. The difference is this is a guarantee. We know without a shadow of a doubt if you invest into our services to get the R&D for us to go back and claim it, that you're going to get that amount plus some interest, as we talked about earlier.
It's almost a multiplier.
It is.
It's a multiplier.
I mean, the reality is the first time around, it's about a 200% ROI. Yep. I'm not really sure where you can go to get that type of return on your investment. And keep in mind that this is the other conversation that we have with our doctors. It's not your money, it's actually the IRS's money. They actually took this money, so we're using a portion of that money to go get your money. So the reality is, let's say it was $10,000, and a portion of that is to hire us. The other portion is yours. All of that was Uncle Sam was holding on to it. We just went and took it back.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that the cool thing about the credit itself is that if you can't expense this, you can't tax plan this to get this money back.
Right.
If you don't take R&D, you're just giving them the money to keep forever and always. And every year, like we were talking about for that statute of limitations, that year that falls off, Uncle Sam gets to keep it. Yep. They keep your money. That should have been going into your pocket.
So what I want to make sure I understand is that they're not going to notify you that this money is yours.
No.
Okay.
Why would they?
So
absolutely not. No, they're not gonna notify you. They're not gonna give you an alert. They're not gonna say, hey, you've got 30 days to apply for this thing. Time's gonna run out, and then they get to pocket it. So we have a strong belief here at this company, R&D or tax planning itself, that you know how to spend your money better than the IRS does.
That's right.
So,
as a matter of fact, we hear all the time that definitely do a lot better job.
Yeah.
So I want to talk some case examples.
Sure.
So We've talked about chiropractic quite a bit. We talked about dental labs. We talked about, the custom fencing, compounding pharmacies, different ones like that there. So throw out a couple different case examples, maybe, Ryan, that recently that you've worked with. We got Scott,
Absolutely.
the dental lab. And
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll. So we have a couple clients that, like I said, you can check our reviews and see them themselves. I know they're going to be happy with it. We have a dental lab from Pennsylvania that we just looked at, and their original credit was upwards of about $400,000 or $500,000 that they did. Their current year, meaning that this year, 2022 study produced about $250,000 for that single lab. I mean, it's pretty impressive. For chiropractors, we've got some chiropractors, especially in our double dip states. Yeah. California, other places that are doing six figures for those as well.
We had a couple of them at $500,000.
Yeah, exactly, for chiropractic. Yeah. Exactly, and it's just
but that's not the norm. I would just say that for chiropractors.
Absolutely, yes. So and it kind of goes back to this. The healthcare industry doesn't have the supply cost, that the manufacturing does. And so, unfortunately, just to be honest, they kind of get the short end of the stick, but it's still money. It's still their money. Yeah. They have, they need to get that back. They deserve to get that back. So, but yeah, I mean, we've got some amazing chiropractors getting some good credits back. We got some chiropractors that I just got an email not too long ago. And before we even opened up the 2023 process, they were already reaching out going, when can I do my study? When can I do my study? Because they know the benefit. They've seen the benefit. And, the thing that I always tell these, especially the new clients, is you really want to get started as soon as possible. Because just like starting with anything, there's some groundwork that needs to be laid and taken care of. But once that groundwork gets taken care of, every year after that, it's just this smooth, easy process of just rinse and repeat every single year. And it's just get started now. Why wait? You're literally losing money every time you don't do that. So
and really our goal is really to be the guide in this conversation, is to like you said, the first time around gathering that documentation sometimes can seem a little overwhelming. We're, again, as I said earlier, we're looking at some software to be able to streamline that. Until then, though, is gathering that information. That's going to be the clunkiest it's ever going to be. And like you said earlier, our average is $30,000 for chiropractors, and of course it goes up from there. Let's say it takes you 3 or 4 hours. You said the example earlier. Are you going to make $10,000, $8,000, $5,000 an hour? And a lot of this stuff can be done not by you, the doctor, but someone who on your staff, a bookkeeper, an accountant, someone like that, who definitely doesn't make that much per hour. One, Ryan, and I apologize, I didn't mention this earlier. So we talked about wages as part of it, but like with the dental lab, there's another factor that comes into play there, and you alluded to it here a second ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So dental labs are just a manufacturing company, in total, basically. You have something there that you get to weigh in to what dictates as far as the size of the R&D credit, and that's your supply cost. What it takes for you to do an individual job and the cost that it takes to do that specific job is going to help bolster that credit up and blow that credit up so that it's going to be compared with wages, with the labor cost that it takes to go in there. It's going to allow you to get a bigger credit. Usually, this credit itself was actually created for the manufacturing industry in '81. And so therefore, if you're producing a product and there is those 4-part tests like we had talked about earlier, then you're going to be able to get a little bit bigger of a credit. And so we can actually weigh your supply cost into that and help you get a maximum credit.
So the materials that they're using, the trial and error when they're making maybe an example of one.
So like, for example, for dental labs.
Prototype.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to use dental labs. Every piece that they make is for an individual order, is for an individual client. So therefore, 100% of that supply cost that goes into that job can be used, and then the labor cost associated with it. And then what happens is let's say, like you said, they're making a crown or a bridge or something like that. That supply cost that it takes to make in there, that job is an individual job. It's going to be used. And then how many of those are you doing throughout the year? How many orders have you done throughout the year? All that adds up, and every one of those jobs and individual jobs is going to help you get a bigger and bigger credit. And so, like I said, if you make that product and you have a degree of that trial and error and you're making something custom like dental labs or other like tech companies are huge, software companies are huge, it's only going to get you a bigger credit, basically.
Well, kind of deviate a couple things. I'll move off the chiropractic and dental labs. I'll talk about some manufacturing, some technology. So we had a technology company that engaged us here a couple years ago, and it was their first time they did it. They were brand new, meaning that they were pre-revenue, meaning that they hadn't made a dime yet, and it was using AI technology back before AI became popular here a couple years ago. And it was taking this technology and being able to see 5,000 points on your body. They designed it for sign language. And so there's like 450 different types of sign language around the world, and they were trying to utilize AI technology. Out of that, it was able to be used in the medical space because, you know, after you have surgery, whatever the case is, it would use this technology. Your doctor could get on there. This is back during COVID. So a lot of things happened in COVID. But it's amazing that we were able to get them about $500,000 in credit, but because they didn't have any income and they were brand new, they were less than 5 years old, we were able to use this as to cover their payroll taxes. So if you have a brand new company that's only been around and you haven't even made it a dime yet, you've just been burning money, we call it the burn rate, because they had, you know, their technology, they were programmers and hardware and things like that, all that was part of it. And one little note, too, that it has to be here in the States.
Yes.
When it comes to software, we see a lot of this where they'll hire someone over in another country to build their software or program their software. And unfortunately, those wages are not going to count. It's going to have to be U.S.-based unless you they work with a company, or pardon me, you work with a company that you pay here locally, and they do a payroll out. But again, keep that in mind. So that's the first one I want to talk about. So even if you're, you know, pre-revenue, been in business for less than 5 years, there is a way to use that credit. In the second situation I want to give you, and I may have alluded to it earlier, we had a referral from another client who they did custom fencing, where they came in and they made the wrought iron. They'd take this wrought iron and they'd bend it and they'd weld it and they would cut it and stuff. And I did use that as the CAD design. Well, when you get into those materials, there's a lot of materials that go into place there. And so there's a lot of trial and error. They're doing this custom design. So a lot of that one there was now, it all depends upon your entity. Normally we can only go back 3 years for an S corporation or an LLC or a sole proprietor, but this is a C corp. And as long as they can document it, we can go back indefinitely. We went back 10 years. We found them $2 million.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's for C corps.
Yeah, for C corps. Yeah.
That's really neat. That's really neat.
And most of our clients fall in the category of S corps or sole proprietors or partnerships. But just keep in mind that if you are a manufacturer or you are a technology company or something like that, then of course we can go back indefinitely as long as you can document it. And there was another company, one that actually the business next to us uses. And they created some great technology as well. And so the big thing is just keep in mind that if you have any questions as to whether your industry does qualify, then let us know. I'm on a call tomorrow with one of my tax attorneys with a company that has some technology. They have some techniques in the chiropractic space, and then also a material that's used in chiropractic treatment. And so the combination of those three, we're looking at, say, how does this work in the R&D space? Just to make sure, because it doesn't take us but 30 minutes to have a conversation, and we can determine whether or not what you're doing would even qualify.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, and we encourage anybody, if you're curious, if you qualify, you know, first look at, you know, are you making a product or are you in the healthcare industry? And then, you know, like we were talking about before, you know, if you're in the healthcare industry, where's your payroll at? Are you at $200,000, things like that? If you're kind of in those parameters, we'd love to just have a conversation with you. And even if it's the very least just let you know more about R&D, we'd love to have that conversation as well.
So Ryan, let me ask you a question. So let's say, for example, I reach out to you and have a discovery call, and you determine that what I'm doing qualifies. How much does it cost for me to have that study completed?
It's free.
It's free?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're going to tell me how much I'm eligible for?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no risk to you. Like I said, it's completely contingent as far as that goes for what we find. And basically, if nothing's found, nothing's owed. Absolutely. And so it's an amazing thing. Everything we do is guaranteed. And, you know, we put our stamp on it and put our name on it, and we do it with pride so that we can, you know, we back what we do.
Yeah,
so,
very good, very good. Well, is there anything else you feel like we need to share about research and development?
think that's it. I hope everybody got some good content
Yeah,
from
we've
episode
covered quite
one.
a bit. Yeah. So you like what you heard, and you're interested to find out if you qualify for research and development, or you know somebody who you think may qualify. You want to do one of two things. You go to our website, which is quartermastertax.com, and you click on there to schedule an appointment. 15, 20 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes long, nothing real intense. Get some basic information. And then, of course, if you do meet the requirements, then we would take the next steps. The other way you can do it, you can contact our office at 704-490-4111. And you can talk to one of our great team members, and they will get you in contact with one of our R&D specialists here at Quartermaster. And again, thank you very much for joining us on our brand new podcast. We're excited about bringing other topics in the future that are going to help you keep more of what you make, because that's really what we're about. It's not about how much you make, Ryan, it's how much you keep. And so that's our goal. So these different programs we're going to have are going to be talking about things such as that. So how to reduce your taxes, how to keep more of what you make. We're talking about how to get a refund here. Now, in the next sessions in the future, we're going to talk about how not to pay as much going forward.
Yep.
So.
That's good.